Yet the fight raged. Marshal Wade, scarred but unbowed, formed a special task force, the first U.S. Child Rescue Unit. Reforms followed: 1845 laws mandating orphanage inspections, interstate trafficking bans. But whispers persisted. Had the circle truly died or gone deeper underground? If this tale of America's shadowed underbelly has your heart pounding, smash like, share with a friend who loves unraveling mysteries, and subscribe for more. What's your take? Could something like this lurk in your state's history? Comment below. The hollows still echo. Stay vigilant. Shadows of the Circle, the elite's reckoning. With the Hawthorne hangings fading into legend by 1845, the nation exhaled, thinking the nightmare over. But oh, truth seekers, evil doesn't die easy. It burrows deeper, waiting for the next storm. The Circle, that cabal of America's elite, scattered like rats from a sinking ship, but their influence lingered like poison in the well. Federal marshals, led by the indomitable Harlan Wade, chased leads from the opulent, drawing rooms of Washington to the slave quarters of Louisiana, uncovering a conspiracy that threatened the very foundations of our republic. These weren't just traffickers. They were the architects of a system where stolen children fueled the engines of industry, empire, and perversion. And as the bodies piled up, one question haunted every patriot. How far would the powerful go to protect their secrets? If the echoes from Willow Creek still whisper in your dreams, hold on tight. This chapter dives into the heart of corruption, where America's heroes and villains collide. We're exposing the rot at our nation's core. For those unafraid to fight for justice, if you're all in, subscribe now and become part of our unbreakable community. Hit that bell, your next nightmare awaits. Drop your state in the comments. Ever heard whispers of elite scandals in your backyard? The puzzle that kept Wade pacing moonlit nights. Who pulled the Circle's strings, and what horrors awaited in their gilded cages? America in 1845 was a powder keg. Texas annexed. War with Mexico looming. The railroad promising to stitch the nation together. But prosperity masked peril. The Circle's survivors went to ground, using wealth to buy silence. Wade's first target, Senator Jeremiah Dalton of Virginia, named in Clara's testimony as a top bidder. Dalton's plantation, Bellamont, sprawled like a kingdom, cotton fields stretching endless, worked by over 100 souls. A midnight raid found the truth. Hidden barracks beneath the mansion housed 28 trafficked children, branded with Dalton's initials, forced into service. Girls as young as 9 tended his household by day, endured his private attentions by night. Boys labored in mines, emerging coughing blood. Dalton's arrest sparked riots, planters defending property rights, abolitionists cheering. In court, survivors testified. One girl, Mary, 11, sobbed. He said we were his now, no mamas, no homes. Evidence mounted, letters from Hawthorne praising Dalton's discerning eye for quality. Convicted of trafficking and assault, Dalton swung from the gallows in Richmond. His last gasp. The Circle endures. Emboldened, Wade struck north. In New York, banker Theodore Voss, Circle treasurer, operated from a Fifth Avenue mansion. His charity orphanage was a front. Kids funneled to factories, where they assembled textiles in sweatshops, fingers nimble but spirits crushed. A raid freed 45, including twins sold for $800. To test loyalty, Voss's ledgers revealed profits. $50,000 yearly, invested in railroads that carried more victims westward. The Circle's crown jewel, the annual conclave, a lavish retreat in Kentucky's Mammoth Cave, where elites bid in torchlit chambers. Clara's map led Wade there in 1846. Infiltrating disguised as a servant, he witnessed the auction. Children auctioned like art. One boy fetching $2,500 for a senator's education program, a code for indoctrination into servitude. Chaos erupted as marshals stormed in. Gunfire echoed through caverns. Elites fleeing like cowards. Arrested. 3 governors, 5 congressmen, a railroad tycoon. Headlines screamed, "Traitors to our children." But victory came at cost. Wade's family threatened. His son kidnapped briefly. Returned with a note, "Cease or lose all." Witnesses died mysteriously. Poisoned wine, accidental falls. One Circle member, Dr. Crow, evaded capture longest, his Charleston lab a chamber of horrors. Raids found operating tables stained with blood, jars of preserved organs from child specimens. Crow ranted in custody. Science demands sacrifice, the weak for the strong. He hanged, but his notes inspired reforms banning unethical experiments. By 1847, over 800 children rescued, reunited or placed in new homes. Laws strengthened, Federal Child Protection Bureau formed, orphan trains regulated. Yet shadows lingered. Rumors of circle remnants fleeing to California gold fields, trafficking minors' kids. Wade retired a hero in 1850, penning memoirs. We fought not just men, but the devil in our midst. Survivors like Clara became advocates, her story inspiring the first child welfare societies. If this reckoning has fired your patriotic spirit, like, share, subscribe. Let's keep unearthing truths together. Your thoughts? Could modern elites hide similar sins? Comment your state and stay tuned. The circle's echoes may still whisper. Fractured chains, the survivors' awakening. As the dust of executions and raids settled across the scarred landscape of 1847 America, the nation grappled with a reckoning unlike any before. The circle's web, once thought impenetrable, lay in tatters, its elite members hanged, imprisoned, or fled to foreign shores. Yet in the quiet aftermath, the true battle began. Not against the monsters who trafficked innocents, but for the souls they had shattered. Over 1,000 children rescued from tunnels, basements, plantations, and forges now faced a world that had forgotten them. Many bore no names beyond numbers in ledgers. Others whispered languages from distant homelands, stolen too young to remember. In makeshift orphanages from Knoxville to Washington, these survivors, pale ghosts with eyes too old for their years, began to awaken. But awakening brought its own horrors, nightmares that clawed at sleep, bodies ravaged by years of deprivation, and minds twisted by indoctrination that whispered, "You belong to the darkness." Brave wanderers into America's shadowed past. If the revelations of the circle have left you reeling, steel yourself. This part turns to the human heart of the nightmare, where resilience clashes with unimaginable trauma. We're not merely retelling tales. We're honoring the unbreakable spirit of those who clawed back from the abyss, reminding us why vigilance is our patriotic duty. If this series has gripped your soul, subscribe now and rally our community of history's guardians. Notification bell on. Dark truths wait for no one. Comment your state below. Has a survivor story from your region's past ever inspired you? The haunting query that plagued caregivers and marshals alike. Could these broken children ever reclaim the light? Or would the shadows claim them forever? The America of 1847-1848. Pulsed with transformation, the Mexican-American. War raging southward, gold fever igniting in California, drawing dreamers westward on treacherous trails. Yet in the east and south, a quieter migration unfolded. Rescued children shuttled to sanctuaries, Quaker homes and newly formed asylums funded by public outrage. Marshal Harlan Wade, graying but resolute, oversaw placements, his task force evolving into the nation's first child protection division. In Willow Creek, the Hawthorne site, now a sealed memorial, became a pilgrimage point, where flowers wilted on unmarked graves. Central to recovery was Clara, the 13-year-old whose testimony felled giants. Placed with a Philadelphia Quaker family, she blossomed into a quiet force. Nights plagued by visions of torchlit auctions, she channeled pain into advocacy, penning anonymous letters to newspapers. "We were merchandise once. Make us citizens now." Her words spurred the 1848 Child Citizenship Act, granting rescued youths automatic rights and protections. But not all paths led upward. In a Richmond orphanage, young Finn, the longest-held Hawthorne captive, struggled most. At 18, his body stunted, lungs scarred from tunnel damp, he recoiled from touch. Convinced freedom was another trick. Caregivers recounted his screams, "Father will punish." Escape's attempts ended in woods, where he'd curl fetal, whispering circle chants. Doctors, pioneers in trauma care, experimented with gentle therapies, music, gardening. But Finn's rage erupted, injuring aides. One stormy night in 1848, he vanished. Body found weeks later in the James River. Suicide ruled officials, but whispers persisted. Circle remnants silencing loose ends. Girls faced unique torments. Many sold for house service, bore children from assaults, tiny innocents, raising tinier ones in captivity. In a Nashville home, 15-year-old Eliza, pregnant upon rescue, birthed a son amid tears. "He's mine, not theirs," She defied, nursing him fiercely. Yet postpartum shadows deepened. Visions of Beaumont's trials haunted her. Supported by women's societies, early feminists, linking trafficking to broader oppressions, she found purpose teaching sewing to fellow survivors. Medical horrors lingered. Dr. Crow's subjects arrived with limbs malformed from experiments, infections raging. In Charleston, a makeshift hospital treated 47 such cases. Amputations, mercury poisoning reversal attempts. One boy, Jacob, 10, blind from chemical tests, learned Braille precursors, his fingers tracing stories of light he'd never see. "I dream colors," he'd say, inspiring donors. Reunions brought bittersweet joy. Marshals traced origins via ledgers. A Pennsylvania family reclaimed daughter, Rebecca, after 9 years, her Cherokee-inflected speech a tunnel remnant. Embraces dissolved into sobs. Parents aged beyond recognition, siblings strangers. Some rejected rescuers. Mother Abigail said, "You'd sell us again." Indoctrination's grip required patient deprogramming. Ministers and psychologists emerging field coaxing truths. Community responses varied. Northern towns welcomed with parades. Southern ones whispered shame, planters fearing exposure. Abolitionists like Harriet Tubman drew parallels. Slavery's chain links to this. Evil, her networks aided, escapes for those fearing re-trafficking. By 1849, successes emerged. A group of older boys trained in trades opened a cooperative in Ohio, barrels stamped. From shadows to strength, girls formed quilting circles, patterns encoding survivor symbols, broken chains mended, yet threats loomed. Circle fugitives in Europe plotted returns. Anonymous notes warned Wade. The web reforms. Assassination attempt in 1849, poisoned. Coffee left him bedridden, but he rallied, exposing a remnant cell in New Orleans. Survivors' voices grew. In 1850, Clara testified before Congress, veiled for safety. "We were America's hidden shame. Make laws our shield." Her words birthed expanded federal oversight. As decade dawned, many thrived. Marriages, families, but scars endured. Night terrors, distrust, early deaths from weakened health. Yet their legacy, inspiring orphan reforms, fostering systems prioritizing care over profit. If these tales of triumph amid tragedy stir your American pride, like, share, subscribe. Together we illuminate the dark. Thoughts on survivor resilience? State in comments. Chains fracture, but some bind forever. The lingering evil. By the dawn of the 1850s, as America hurtled toward sectional crisis, compromise of 1850, bandaging slavery's wounds, the Hawthorne scandal's echoes reverberated. The circle officially dismantled, its leaders dead or disgraced. Yet evil, like kudzu in southern soil, sent runners underground. Whispers reached Marshal Wade's desk. Isolated farms reporting odd bulk purchases, children vanishing along orphan trains, shadowy figures in port cities peddling indentures. Was this scattered crime? Or the circle reborn, Mina adapting to scrutiny, fellow guardians of forgotten truths? If survivors' awakenings moved you, prepare, the nightmare isn't buried. It evolves. This series peels back America's layers, revealing how darkness persists when vigilance wanes. For patriots who demand the full story, subscribe and stand with us. Bell on. More revelations loom. Comment your state. Ever sensed unresolved evils in local law? The chilling riddle Wade chased to his grave. Had they truly eradicated the root, or merely pruned the vines? The 1850s America boiled. Kansas bleeding. Railroads binding coasts. Immigration swelling cities. Opportunity abounded, but so did vulnerability. Irish fleeing famine. Germans escaping revolution. Orphans overwhelming systems. Perfect soil for remnants. Wade, semi-retired but consulted, received reports from agents. In Kentucky Hills, a benevolent society mirrored Hawthorne's wealthy widow caring for dozens. Never seen publicly. Raid in 1852 uncovered 19 children in root cellars, branded subtly. Widow, circle associates kin, hanged amid protests from respectable allies. Westward, gold rush chaos bred horrors. San Francisco's underbelly imported children, via ships, Chinese girls for brothels, white orphans for mines. A 1853, bust freed 32 from a boarding house, owner linked to fugitive. Voss via coded telegrams. South deepened entrenchment, planters evading scrutiny. used apprentices, trafficked freeborns bound illegally. Louisiana bayous hid camps where kids toiled sugar fields, disposable as Hawthorne stock. Northern mills hungry for hands lured runaways, echoing old forges. Philadelphia raid 1854, 28 in sweatshop attic. Overseer former Langford apprentice. Wade's final crusade. The root cellar ring, remnants coordinating via Masonic lodges, ironic twist. Infiltrating, agents uncovered, 1855. Conclave in abandoned Virginia. Mine bids on 40 children. Storming forces captured 12, including European returnee posing as immigrant. Gunfight claimed lives. Wade wounded fatally. Dying words. Cut deeper. Roots run to capitals. Post-Wade task force persisted. 1856-1860. Dozens operations disrupted. Hundreds freed, but scale diminished, remnants cautious. Cultural shifts. Literature immortalized. Fictionalized accounts in dime novels. Inspiring real reforms. Survivors Fund established. Clara administering into adulthood. War's shadow loomed. As secession brewed. Some speculated circle influenced, dividing nation to distract from crimes. Unproven but trafficking surged amid chaos. Legacy endured. 1858 Federal Trafficking Enforcement Act. Model for future. Sites like Hawthorne became cautionary landmarks, tours warning of complacency. Yet questions lingered. Untraced ledgers hinting higher connections. Vanished elites. Did evil fully die or await fertile ground? If remnants' persistence unsettles, like, share, subscribe. Our watch continues. Views on lingering evils today. State below. Roots twist deep. The story presses on. Whispers of the coming storm. The war within the shadows. As the 1850s bled into the fateful decade of division, America stood on the precipice of its greatest trial. Sectional tensions crackled like lightning over Kansas. John Brown's raid shook Harper's Ferry, and the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 ignited the fuse that would explode into civil war. Yet amid this thunderous march toward disunion, a quieter, more insidious conflict persisted in the hidden corners of the Republic. The remnants of the circle, those who had escaped the noose or rebuilt in secrecy, saw opportunity in chaos. As armies mobilized and lawmen turned their eyes to secession, the trafficking networks slithered back to life, exploiting the upheaval to snatch children from refugee trails. Burned-out farms and overcrowded cities swollen with war orphans. The Hawthorne scandal, once a national outrage, faded into cautionary footnote as the nation tore itself apart. But for the survivors and the dedicated few who still hunted the shadows, the war was twofold. One fought with muskets on battlefields. The other waged in silence against an evil that fed on human suffering. Fellow keepers of America's darkest truths, if the lingering roots from the last chapter have you glancing over your shoulder, hold fast. This installment reveals how national catastrophe became a cloak for unspeakable crimes. We're not just chronicling history. We're exposing how evil thrives when a nation looks away. For those patriots who refuse to forget, subscribe now and stand united in remembrance. Turn on notifications, the storm is far from over. Drop your state in the comments. Has your family lore ever spoken of strange disappearances during the Civil War era? The question that tormented aging Marshall Wade's successors. Could the trafficking network survive the war, or would the fires of conflict finally burn them out? The America of 1860-1865 was a land transformed by blood and iron. Railroads carried troops instead of commerce. Fields lay fallow as men marched away, and cities groaned under waves of widows, orphans, and contrabands fleeing bondage. In this turmoil, the remnants, now calling themselves the Covenant, to distance from the Circle's infamy, adapted with chilling efficiency. Former buyers turned war profiteers used military contracts as cover, moving children in supply wagons marked medical stores or ordnance. Southern blockade runners smuggled not just cotton but human cargo to Caribbean markets where oversight collapsed. Northern factories, desperate for labor as men enlisted, quietly accepted apprentice children with forged papers. The first alarming reports surfaced in 1861 along the underground railroad routes, now reversed as freed people streamed north. Agents noted children vanishing from refugee camps. In Missouri, a border state ravaged by guerrilla warfare, bushwhackers raided farms, burning homes and carrying off youngsters. One survivor, a teenage Clara, now 26 and working undercover for the Child Protection Division, infiltrated a camp near Springfield and witnessed a transaction. Confederate irregulars trading 10 white orphans to a Covenant broker for rifles. Her report to Washington vanished in bureaucratic chaos as armies mobilized. As battles raged, Bull Run, Shiloh, Antietam, hospitals overflowed with wounded, creating perfect cover for medical horrors. Rogue surgeons, echoing Dr. Crow's legacy, requisitioned unclaimed children from battlefields for experimental treatments, testing new anesthetics, grafting skin from amputees, or injecting compounds to hasten healing. In a makeshift facility near Gettysburg after the 1863 carnage, federal investigators discovered 18 children used as living bandages, skin harvested without consent. The lead doctor, a former Circle associate who'd fled south, hanged as a war criminal, but his notes suggested coordination from Richmond elites. The Confederacy, desperate for manpower, institutionalized child impressment. Boys as young as 12 drummed for regiments, but others vanished into labor battalions, digging entrenchments, hauling ammunition under fire. Covenant members embedded in the Confederate War Department funneled orphans to plantations working war contracts, saltpeter mines, ironworks, Tredegar factories. Girls faced worse, assigned to officers, comfort, or sold to brothels serving troops. In occupied New Orleans after Union capture, federal troops uncovered a warehouse holding 37 children awaiting export to Cuba, papers signed by a Covenant-linked quartermaster. The Union side proved no sanctuary. In northern cities, draft riots in 1863, New York saw mobs lynching black citizens while opportunists snatched white children amid anarchy. Industrialists like former Voss associates contracted with labor agents to supply factories producing uniforms and munitions. Children worked 18-hour shifts, collapsing at machines, their deaths recorded as accidents. One Philadelphia mill raid in 1864 freed 52. Many bearing Hawthorne-era brands faded but visible. Clara, now a legend in protection circles, led daring rescues. Disguised as a nurse, she infiltrated southern lines, smuggling children north on sanitary commission boats. Her network, survivors grown into adulthood, formed the Lantern Bearers, guiding young fugitives to safety. One operation in 1864 liberated 29 from a Georgia plantation where Covenant buyers tested field endurance on children fed experimental rations. As war ground on, evidence mounted of high-level complicity. Intercepted Confederate correspondence hinted at a children's relief fund, actually laundering trafficking profits. Union intelligence captured a Covenant ledger in Richmond's Fall, listing transactions with Northern bankers, suggesting the network played both sides for survival. Appomattox in 1865 brought surrender, but not justice. As armies disbanded, many Covenant figures melted into Reconstruction chaos. Some fled west with Confederate treasure. Others posed as philanthropists aiding war orphans. The Child Protection Division, starved of funds in post-war austerity, struggled to pursue leads. Yet rays of hope pierced the darkness. Survivors like Clara lobbied Congress, securing 1866 amendments strengthening anti-trafficking laws. Freedmen's Bureau agents, originally aiding formerly enslaved, expanded to protect all vulnerable children. Newspapers, galvanized by war's end, revived Hawthorne coverage, dubbing the wartime resurgence the Shadow War. But Clara's final report, filed in 1867, chilled readers. The Covenant endures. War merely pruned the branches. The root remains buried deep, awaiting new soil. If this wartime descent into deeper shadows has your blood running cold, smash like, share with someone who needs to know, and subscribe. We're far from the end. What do you think? Did the Civil War destroy or empower these networks? State in comments. The storm breaks, but new tempests brew. The phoenix of evil, with Lee's surrender at Appomattox and Lincoln's assassination, casting long shadows over 1865. America entered Reconstruction, an era of promised rebirth that instead became fertile ground for old evils to rise, phoenix-like from the ashes. The South lay prostrate, its plantations ruined, its society upended. Freed people sought new lives, while white Southerners clung to lost privilege. In this upheaval, the Covenant, leaner, more ruthless, rebuilt with terrifying speed, disguised as orphan relief, societies and industrial schools. They preyed on the most vulnerable, children of freed slaves, war orphans north and south, and impoverished white families displaced by conflict. The nation's gaze fixed on congressional reconstruction, radical Republicans, and the Ku Klux Klan's terror. Few noticed the quieter atrocity unfolding in remote farms, urban tenements, and western frontiers. Truth-seekers unafraid of Reconstruction's darkest corners. If the wartime shadows left you shaken, brace for the resurrection. This series honors those who fought silent battles while the nation rebuilt, reminding us that freedom's price includes eternal vigilance. If you stand with us, subscribe now and fortify our ranks. Notifications on, the graves are opening. Comment your state, any family stories of lost children during Reconstruction. The agonizing question that haunted Clara and her lantern bearers. Had the war scattered the seeds of evil farther than ever before? The America of 1865-1877 was a fractured giant struggling to heal. Federal troops occupied the South. Freedmen's Bureau schools sprang up. Carpetbaggers and scalawags clashed with redeemers. Yet amid this tumult, children disappeared at alarming rates. In 1866, Bureau agents in Mississippi reported entire families arriving at refugee camps minus younger siblings, snatched en route by labor. Recruiters, investigations, uncovered industrial schools in Alabama and Georgia, where black and poor white children were bound to years of servitude under apprenticeship contracts eerily resembling Hawthorne-era forgeries. The Covenant's masterstroke was co-opting Reconstruction, philanthropy. Northern charities, eager to aid war orphans, funneled funds to Southern benevolent societies run by former Circle members. One such, the Southern Children's Relief Association in Charleston, received thousands in donations used to acquire children under guise of care. By 1868, Clara's undercover work exposed its basement cells, holding 41 children awaiting distribution to revive plantations now worked by apprenticed youth. Western migration provided new hunting grounds. As homesteaders pushed into Kansas, Texas, and Indian Territory, orphan trains, originally reform efforts, were infiltrated. Covenant agents posed as placement officers, diverting children to remote ranches where they vanished into forced labor. In Texas, huge cattle barons rebuilt, empires using child vaqueros, boys, as young as 8 roping longhorns, breaking under brutal conditions. Raids in 1870 uncovered mass graves on one spread, 27 small skeletons bearing signs of overwork and punishment. Northern cities, swollen with immigrants and veterans, birthed new horrors. In Chicago and New York, street children were swept into newsboy homes that funneled them to factories or worse. A 1871 Chicago raid, ironically, aided by the Great Fire's chaos, freed 63 from a warehouse. Many branded with Covenant symbols evolved from circle marks. Medical atrocities resurfaced. Former Confederate surgeons, barred from practice, established clandestine clinics offering reconstructive treatments to wealthy patrons, using trafficked children as subjects for plastic surgeries, limb-lengthening experiments, or quack cures peddled to maimed veterans. One Louisiana Bayou clinic, raided in 1872, contained operating theaters stained with decades of blood, jars preserving child organs labeled for study. Clara, now in her 30s and revered as the Lantern Mother, coordinated nationwide resistance. Her lantern bearers, hundreds strong, including grown Hawthorne survivors, operated safe houses along migration routes. They intercepted orphan trains, forged freedom papers, and spirited children to Quaker communities in the Midwest. One daring 1873 operation liberated 88 from a Memphis holding facility, burning records to ashes. But victories came at terrible cost. Lantern agents were assassinated, poisoned, shot, lynched under cover of Klan terror. Clara herself survived 3 attempts, the last in 1875, leaving her scarred but unbroken. Federal support waned as Reconstruction ended. Hayes's 1877 troop withdrawal signaled Redeemer's return and Covenant resurgence. The Compromise of 1877 not only abandoned Southern black citizens but effectively dismantled child protection efforts. Bureau closed, agents reassigned, funding slashed. Covenant flourished openly in Redeemer South, partnering with convict lease systems, trafficked children leased to mines, turpentine camps, railroads. Death rates rivaled slavery's worst. Yet resistance endured. Survivors' testimonies before fleeting congressional committees spurred 1874 amendments to anti-trafficking, laws largely unenforced. Newspapers exposed scandals, public outrage flaring briefly before fading. By 1877, Clara's final dispatch warned, The Covenant wears new masks, industrial progress. Southern redemption, Western expansion. They have learned patience. We must learn endurance. If Reconstruction's hidden graves disturb your sleep, like, share, subscribe. Our vigil continues. Thoughts on how chaos breeds evil. State below. The phoenix rises, but embers of hope glow. The industrial empire of innocence lost. As Reconstruction's turbulent chapter closed in 1877, America hurtled into the Gilded Age, a glittering era of robber barons, skyscrapers piercing the heavens, and railroads stitching the continent into an industrial colossus. Mark Twain coined the term to mock the thin veneer of gold over festering corruption. And nowhere was that rot deeper than in the resurgence of the Covenant. With federal troops withdrawn from the South, big business ascendant, and laissez-faire doctrine reigning supreme, the traffickers evolved into corporate titans. They cloaked their operations in the language of progress. Industrial training schools, benevolent placement, agencies and orphan asylums funded by Carnegie-esque philanthropists, whose fortunes were built, in part, on the sweat and suffering of stolen children. The Hawthorne tunnels and circle auctions seemed quaint relics compared to the mechanized, nationwide machine that now harvested America's most vulnerable for profit on an unprecedented scale. Fellow sentinels against the darkness, if Reconstruction's hidden graves left you questioning the cost of progress, prepare yourself. This chapter unveils how the Gilded Age's glittering facade concealed the most sophisticated child exploitation network in our nation's history. We're exposing the truth behind the American dream's nightmare underbelly. For patriots who know real prosperity demands justice. If this saga fuels your resolve, subscribe now and join our unbreakable alliance. Notifications on The Gold is Tarnished. Comment your state below. Any industrial-era legends of lost apprentices in your hometown's mills or mines. The question that haunted investigators into the new century. Could an evil this vast, this intertwined with wealth and power, ever truly be dismantled? The America of 1878-1900 was a dynamo of transformation. Immigration surged, millions from Ireland, Italy, Eastern Europe pouring through Ellis Island. Cities exploded. Chicago rose from fire's ashes. New York soared with tenements. Pittsburgh belched steel smoke. Trust monopolized oil, rail, coal. Child labor boomed legally. Hundreds of thousands toiled in factories. But the Covenant's shadow network operated beyond even lax laws, trafficking children into conditions that made legal mills seem merciful. The Covenant, rebranded as the Beneficent Order, a fraternal society with lodges in every major city, membership including industrialists, politicians, even clergy. Dues-funded relief work, but ledgers seized in rare raids revealed dividends from child placement. They partnered with steamship lines to intercept immigrant children. Separated at ports, orphan trains diverting cars to private sidings, and southern sharecropping families relieved of offspring for northern factories. In Pennsylvania coalfields, Covenant schools fed breakers where boys as young as 7 sorted anthracite in choking dust, fingers mangled by machinery. A 1883 raid on a Scranton facility uncovered 112 children living in barracks, branded with subtle order tattoos, eagles clutching chains. Death rates tripled legal mines, bodies dumped in slag heaps. Textile empires in New England proved voracious. Lowell and Fall River mills, romanticized as worker utopias, hid Covenant wings where trafficked girls worked 14-hour shifts, sleeping in dormitories locked at night. One Massachusetts investigation in 1887 found 89 girls, many Eastern European, drugged upon arrival to ensure compliance. Owners claimed apprenticeship contracts, signed by guardians, forged by order agents. Western railroads devoured lives. As transcontinentals pushed through mountains, Covenant supplied track orphans to camps, children laying ties, grading roadbeds under brutal foremen. In Utah Territory, a 1890 avalanche of evidence, 67 small bodies, unearthed from a collapsed bunkhouse. Payroll listing them as juvenile laborers paid to an order account. Medical exploitation reached scientific sophistication. Covenant-funded research. Institutes in Chicago and Philadelphia conducted studies on child physiology, testing, factory fatigue limits, nutritional minimums for productivity, even early X-ray exposure effects post-Röntgen's 1895 discovery. Subjects: trafficked children deemed surplus. Journals published findings. Anonymously, advancing ergonomics while burying human cost. Urban horrors flourished in vice districts. New York's Tenderloin, Chicago's Levee, children sold into prostitution under protective. Madams tied to the order. Boys groomed for elite clubs, catering to Gilded Age excesses. A 1892 police raid on a Manhattan brownstone freed 41, many bearing scars from training. Clara, now in her 50s and dubbed the Eternal Lantern, waged guerrilla war from a secret Philadelphia headquarters. Her lantern bearers, thousands strong, infiltrated factories, bribed conductors, forged escapes. One legendary 1889 operation derailed an orphan train in Indiana, liberating 156 children under cover of staged accident. Journalists like Jacob Riis and muckrakers exposed fragments, how the other half. Lives hinting at deeper networks, but order influence muzzled full revelation. Politicians on payroll blocked reforms. Child labor laws passed weekly, loopholes wide. Yet cracks appeared. A 1894 coal strike turned violent when miners discovered Covenant children used as scabs, sparking riots that exposed ledgers. Public fury forced congressional hearings. Clara testified, veiled, voice trembling but resolute. These are not apprentices, they are prisoners of profit. By century's turn, over 2,000 rescued in major busts, but estimates pegged active victims at 50,000 annually. The order adapted, shifting to adoption agencies, placing children with wealthy families for domestic service. Clara's last public act in 1898, burning a captured order ledger on Boston Common steps, declaring, "The Gilded Age glitters because it is plated over our children's blood." If this industrial abyss has ignited your outrage, smash like, share with fellow truth seekers, and subscribe. Our fight echoes hers. Thoughts on wealth built on suffering? State in comments. The gold cracks, revealing steel beneath. The legacy and the unfinished war. As the 20th century dawned with electric lights banishing night and automobiles, rumbling past horse carriages, America entered the progressive era. Muckrakers, shining spotlights into corruption's corners, trustbusters reigning monopolies, and reformers battling sweatshops and saloons. The beneficent order exposed, fractured, retreated deeper into shadows, morphing yet again. Some threads dissolved under scrutiny, others wove into legitimate institutions, carrying tainted practices forward. The Hawthorne nightmare, now generations old, lived on as cautionary myth, faded newspaper clippings and sealed court records. But for the descendants of survivors, the lantern-bearers' heirs, and a new generation of investigators, the war never ended. The question was no longer whether the evil persisted, but whether America had learned enough to finally extinguish it, or whether it would rise again in modern guise. Brave chroniclers of our nation's soul, we've reached the culmination of this decade-spanning saga, from Hawthorne's tunnels to gilded factories. This final chapter ties the threads, honors the unbroken, and warns that vigilance is eternal. We're not ending a story, we're passing the lantern to you. If this journey has changed how you see America's past and present, subscribe now and carry the light forward. Notifications on echoes never die. Final comment: call your state and one lesson this history teaches you. The eternal question, Clara whispered on her deathbed in 1912. Have we cut the root, or merely taught it to hide better? The America of 1900-1920 roared with reform. Theodore Roosevelt charged up San Juan Hill and down Wall Street. Pure food laws cleansed markets. Lewis Hines' photographs seared child labor's horrors into public conscience. States banned mill work for under 14s. Compulsory education spread. The Covenant's remnants, now fragmented cells, adapted ruthlessly. Orphan trains ended in 1929, but private agencies persisted, some order-tainted. Adoptions masked sales to farms needing hands. Western homesteads still swallowed children. A 1908 Kansas raid uncovered 38 on one ranch, worked like Hawthorne captives. Urban reformatories, meant to rehabilitate, became holding pens. New York's House of Refuge, investigated 1910, housed trafficked youth funneled by corrupt courts. Industrial schools in the South revived apprenticeship abuses under new names. World War I offered fresh chaos. As men shipped to Europe, factories boomed again. Covenant survivors supplied war orphans. To munitions plants, children, handling explosives, maimed in accidents hushed as patriotic sacrifice. Progressive triumphs accumulated. Hines' photos spurred 1916 federal child labor law, struck down, but momentum built. National Child Labor Committee, founded by Hawthorne scandal descendants, lobbied relentlessly. By 1920s, most states restricted youth work. Clara's legacy endured through her adopted daughter, Eleanor, raised from a rescued orphan who led the lantern bearers into modernity. Using telephones, automobiles, even early airplanes, they coordinated cross-country rescues. Eleanor's 1915 bust of a Chicago placement ring freed 94, seizing records linking to original order founders' grandsons. The 1920s jazz age brought complacency. Prohibition gangsters trafficked to new but separate from old networks. Some speculated Covenant dissolved entirely, absorbed into legitimate business. Evil diluted, yet echoes persisted. Great Depression 1930s saw orphan hordes again. New Deal reforms finally entrenched protections. Fair Labor Standards Act, 1938, banning most child labor. Bwai mobilized youth legally, but underground networks briefly flared. Post-war prosperity buried the past. Hawthorne site overgrown. Willow Creek a sleepy town. Records classified or lost. Survivors' descendants blended into society. Doctors, teachers, senators carrying quiet trauma and fierce protectiveness. But in 1950s archives, researchers unearthed connections. Certain foundations, still funding child welfare, traced to order fortunes laundered through philanthropy. Whispers of ritual abuse in elite circles, unproven but chillingly familiar. The unfinished war became institutional. Modern child protective services, missing children networks, international anti-trafficking laws, all rooted in Clara's lantern. Hawthorne's horror. Today, as we confront contemporary exploitation, online predation, border crises, foster system failures, the echoes resonate clearest. The forms change. Tunnels to containers, chains to coercion, auctions to dark web bids. But the essence remains. Clara's final journal entry, discovered 1920, we saved thousands, but evil is patient. It waits for us to forget. Do not forget. The Hawthorne legacy isn't just horror, it's proof of resilience. Children who survived tunnels built lives, families, movements. Their blood flows in activists fighting today. America's story is dual, capable of profound evil, profound good. The lantern passes to us. If this epic has moved you, chilled, inspired, awakened, honor it, like, share widely, subscribe deeply. Tell friends, some truths must never dim. Final thoughts in comments. How will you carry the lantern? The basement is sealed, the tunnels filled, but the echoes call us to vigilance forever. Thank you for walking these shadows with us. The light is ours to keep burning.